I went to the director of the Emmanuel Gospel Center, who was Doug Hall at the time, and that's where the classes were being held for the seminary. And so that's how I met Doug. So I went to him and I said, okay, I got this crazy idea that I want to come out of the system, the healthcare system. I want to leave my job at Boston City Hospital, just work maybe a couple of nights a week to support us. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to try becoming the neighborhood missionary nurse. And I can advocate for everybody, hook them up, because I know all the doctors now. I know all the hospitals. I know where to go for all of the different things. Plus, I can really begin to build a network of people. I can kind of create my own little small town in the midst of this urban place where there's so much violence and so much fear. There's just so much fear going on with the children, with the adults, everything. And so I said, I don't know if it's going to work, but I need some kind of a organization to work under, because I can't just say, okay, hi, I'm a missionary nurse from nowhere. So I needed to have some organization to back me on this. So Doug being Doug, thank God for Doug Hall, he was like, sure, give it a try. No money, no support, no nothing, just, yeah, go ahead, give it a try. So I did. And within a month, I had like 60 people that I was seeing in my neighborhood. And the interesting thing, if you know anything about urban America, if you know anything about broken, hurting people, you don't go into each other's homes. People are afraid to have somebody come into their home. They're afraid that you might see something, you might report them to somebody, you might do something to them. And so people don't really generally invite you to come in. And they definitely are tired of people coming and banging on the doors and wanting to preach at them. So, but I was their nurse, and I ended up helping people who were pregnant, people who had babies who were sick, teenagers, kids, grown-ups, everybody. It was kind of like several of the doctors eventually started calling me the local guru, because that's kind of who I was, because they had no connection to that. But if somebody got sick and I knew what was wrong with them, I could take them to the doctor who could make them better, which really became incredibly important when HIV/AIDS hit the scene, which it hit hard in my neighborhood. As soon as the IV drug users all started getting AIDS, and within 6 months, a year, most of them died because they had no access to health care, and there wasn't anything for them. And when later, as they developed the medicine, you had to take it every single day at exactly the right time, and if you didn't, then it wouldn't work, and you actually end up with a worse mess than you had to start with. And so what happened was, and then the doctor, a lot of them were drug addicts, and so the doctors got so they would say, okay, I can write your prescription for pain medicine, or because you're homeless, you're sick, you're an addict, or I can write your prescription for the medication, but if you don't take it exactly right. And so most of them, being who they were, they took the pain medication and didn't get the medicine that they were supposed to get. And so people were dying like crazy all around. And we ended up having a little church in our house and Bible buddies for the kids. 95% of our little church congregation was affected either directly or an immediate family member directly impacted by AIDS. 95% of our congregation. So I did that for 22 years, and then eventually was getting more and more worn out. I was moving people in with us that were homeless and dying, probably with at least a couple hundred people at their time of death. And somebody talked about not knowing what to say to somebody when they're dying or when they're sick and suffering. What I eventually learned was that God calls us to be with somebody. He calls us to be. He says he's the great I am, not the great I do. And we get lost sometimes when we think we're supposed to do something for somebody and there's nothing to do. So what I started to figure out was that he called us to be a light, to be his presence, to be his comfort, to just be his truth in this crazy world that we live in. And so after a long period of time of doing this and having people living in our house with us, I had 4 kids of my own. We adopted a couple of kids. We just had a lot of stuff going on in the house, the church in our house, the Bible buddies came every day. And so there was all kinds of stuff happening, and I had the 60 patrons out in the neighborhood. And so eventually I just was like, I can't do this anymore.